Now we're going to talk about worker classification issues. And this would be pertinent under the Massachusetts Wage Act with respect to employees versus independent contractors, and under both the Massachusetts Wage Act and the FLSA with respect to exempt versus non-exempt classifications. So we're going to start with the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. Okay, an employee is typically a payrolled worker. They get benefits. You take from their payroll check deductions and withholdings, and you meet the requirements of state and federal tax laws and various agency requirements such as unemployment, Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, FICA, which is Social Security, and also, of course, your state and federal income tax withholdings. This is covered by wage and hour laws because this is an employment relationship. Independent contractors, on the other hand, get a 1099. They do not get a W-2. They typically do not get benefits. You would not be withholding any tax money or contributions for unemployment or PFML from their pay, and they're not covered by wage and hour laws. This is an issue that's been coming up for years and years, and still many of my clients misclassify their employees, some of their employees, as independent contractors. And the reason this happens is because it's very, very difficult to properly, lawfully classify a worker as an independent contractor. We have the three-prong test in Massachusetts, or people call it the ABC test. And the individual has to meet all three of these requirements in order to be properly classified as an independent contractor in Massachusetts. So the first is to be free from control and direction and performance. They make their own hours. They choose how to do things, when to do things, free from direction and control by a supervisor. The second prong is that they perform services outside the usual course of the employer's business. So this would be a situation where somebody is doing something totally outside what you do as a company. The very clear example I often give is someone comes into Davis Malm to build shelves in a closet for us. Okay, that is not within the ordinary course of what we do. And then the third prong is that the individual is customarily engaged in an independent, established trade, occupation, profession, or business of the same nature as the services they perform. In other words, they have their own side business. They have their own business through which they provide these services. So frequently, I find that folks who are classified by my clients as independent contractors meet one or two of these, but not all three. And it's very nerve-wracking, I find, for employers to make the change and switch people over from independent contractor status to employee status. But it has to be done, and often, we're able to work through this. We typically do it at an appropriate time, like the beginning of the fiscal year, the beginning of the calendar year. We try to do it in connection with performance evaluation, a raise, a bonus. And at that point, when people transition onto payroll, who have been treated previously as independent contractors, we talk to them about the benefits of being an employee. And clearly the purpose of this law is to protect people. It's to protect their right to get benefits, to have payments made to PFML, Paid Family and Medical Leave, to have payments made into unemployment for you. And so there are ways of making that transition. If you need to make that transition, or your clients need to make that transition, it's something that we can work through with you. It is critically important. Sometimes people will say to me, well, they're only part-time, or well, they only work occasionally. Doesn't matter. If they don't pass this three-prong test, they are employees. So once we properly classify someone as an employee, we then look at whether they're exempt or non-exempt. And we look to the FLSA, which is also consistent with the Massachusetts Wage Act, to determine whether they are exempt or non-exempt. If they're non-exempt, then it means the law applies to them with respect to minimum wage, which is $15 in Massachusetts, $15 an hour, and overtime pay. So overtime pay is all time that's worked in excess of 40 hours in a regular work week. It is paid at 1.5 times the normal hourly rate. And again, in Massachusetts, our minimum wage is $15 an hour. All right, how do we determine whether someone is exempt or non-exempt? So again, the assumption is that people are non-exempt, that this applies, that the law applies, they have to be paid minimum wage, they have to be paid overtime. But there are many exempt categories, and they include, or they consist of the executive exemption, administrative, professional, outside sales, certain computer jobs, and highly compensated employees. We look at the duties test, which is these various classifications, and we also look at whether they meet the salary basis rule, the minimum annual salary. Both of those have to be met. The minimum annual salary amounts are increasing over time. The annual wage for exempt workers that's required in 2024 is $43,888. In 2025, it'll be $58,656. Now, turning to the duties tests that we look at, okay, what does it mean to be an executive for purposes of the exemption? And the focus is that they're managing an enterprise or a recognized department or subdivision of the company. They're also customarily directing the work of at least two people, so they have direct reports, and they have the authority to hire and fire. So there's independent discretion and judgment with respect to recommendations for hiring, firing, advancement, promotions, and other change in status of employees. That's your executive exemption. Your administrative exemption. These employees' primary duty must be to perform office work or other non-manual work related to management or general business operations of the company. And their primary duty includes the exercise of discretion and independent judgment with respect to matters of significance. So again, discretion, independent judgment, important pieces that we look for. And I always tell my clients when we're drafting the job descriptions, be careful what verbs you use. You want to use verbs that indicate the level of independent judgment and decision-making responsibility, as well as the particular duties that might be pertinent to the exemption that applies to that individual, to make sure that we're clear in the job description that this is an exempt position. And then we have the professional exemption. This is where the primary duty or performance of work requires advanced knowledge, and this would be primarily intellectual work or work that requires exercise of discretion and judgment, advanced learning. Oftentimes these are jobs that require degrees, science or learning, and advanced knowledge must be customarily acquired by a prolonged course of specialized intellectual instruction. These are your professionals. Then we have certain computer jobs that are automatically exempt. I won't go through these. You can take a look at the slides after. And then we have a special category for highly compensated individuals. And this category is for folks in 2024 who earn $132,964 a year, in 2025, $151,164. But just getting paid a high wage that's over this threshold is not enough. They also have to regularly perform at least one of the duties of an exempt executive, administrative, or professional employee. So it's a combination of those white-collar exemptions plus the amount that they're paid. So just keep in mind, this came up earlier, under our Wage Act, we have treble damages, triple the amount that is unpaid or owed, unpaid and owed, plus we're liable for attorney's fees and costs. With respect to the Internal Revenue Service, the Department of Revenue, the Paid Family and Medical Leave Department, the DUA, the Department of Unemployment Assistance, you are subject to investigations and penalties. And I've lived through these kinds of investigations with my clients, and believe me, it's not something that you want to subject yourself to. Also, very importantly, under the state law, individuals are liable under the Wage Act. Triple damages, attorney's fees and costs, and this can be presidents, treasurers, officers or agents who have responsibility for management of the company. And another Wage Act issue that I want to bring to your attention, this is relatively new law, and it's worth pointing out. This case, Reuter versus Methuen, reiterated and enforced very aggressively that final wages, including accrued and unused vacation pay, must be paid on the last day of employment, not the day after, the last day of employment. And believe it or not, automatic liability for the triple damages and the attorney fees and costs result from any late payment. So sort of the common wisdom in terms of dealing with this sometimes very, really impossible requirement is that if somebody resigns immediately, or if you're ready to terminate them immediately because of some egregious conduct, you put them on a paid leave of absence. They're out of the workplace, they don't have access to your premises, they don't have access to your computer system, but it gives you the time that you need to tee up that final paycheck, including their accrued and unused vacation time. And one little side note, when we say accrued and unused vacation time, if you have PTO that includes vacation time, then it's that PTO, that accrued and unused PTO, that has to be paid out on the last day of employment as part of final wages. Any questions?
Voluntary, like someone resigns but gives 2 weeks notice, and we pay twice a month. Say, can we pay them that on their regular schedule? That has to be the final.
Not if the employee voluntarily resigns.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
If the company terminates you,
Right.
you have to pay them on the day of termination.
Okay, so for the
If the employee voluntarily resigns, you have to pay the following payroll.
Yeah, perfect, great.
That's right? Okay.
So say we are terminating someone and then we do a next day direct deposit, so we technically pay them on their termination date, but then the bank doesn't release their funds until the very next morning.
Yeah, I would recommend that you make that next day their last day of employment.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
say that under that case, the court made a statement to the effect that the employer takes the risk of whether it's done correctly.